I'm Sarah Townsend, editor of Place Northwest. I hope you've enjoyed some of the networking in the other room and got yourself a coffee to start the day. This is our latest event hosted through the Remo platform, and it allows us to offer what is essentially a virtual reality version of our popular live events. We're confident that Remo is a brilliant step towards a more authentic conference experience, while staying online and keeping everyone safe. I'd like to thank our sponsors today, Savills and ROC Consulting. We've got 70 registered guests this morning, so it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for discussion and interaction with colleagues in the industry. In terms of format, there will be two halves with networking in between. In each half, there'll be a presentation followed by a panel with a break in between. There will also be half an hour's networking at the end, so you can continue making connections and doing business. The networking room is where you can join tables and video chat with other guests, moving around by double-clicking on a table to meet other people. You can take conversations private if you wish. Just see if there's a table of two free on either side of you and suggest to your fellow delegate that they meet you there, for example, on table 3. You both then double-click on that table and off you go. There's also private messaging if you want to swap numbers or suggest times for follow-up meetings. So no awkward hovering around someone waiting for the right moment to muscle in on their conversation. We've included a short video guide to getting the most out of the networking, which you can find at the top of your screens to the left of the speaker's green room. You can also click on the sponsors' logos to find out more about them. Another quick tip, you can also drag the floor plan around and zoom in and out to help you locate what you need. If you haven't already, it's quite useful to create your own profile so that when someone clicks on you, they can see exactly who you are, helping you to work the room as you would do one of our physical conferences. Don't forget to pose questions to our speakers using the Q&A button on your right as well. We tend to get a really good variety of topics, and I shall weave them into our panel discussions, and we'll try to get through as many of them as possible. Remo is a relatively new format for us, having adopted it in September as a solution to the ongoing situation. We're excited to be using it, and we believe it presents a more user-friendly and authentic opportunity to get involved, rather than the quite flat video experience offered by Zoom. Please do give us feedback after the event though, because we're always looking to improve. Right, on to today's agenda. The education property sector is broad, to say the least, encompassing the needs of schools, universities, colleges, further education providers, specialist providers, and more, and they each have varying requirements. Add to that the fierce competition within the sector for students from both the UK and overseas, together with emerging trends in technology and remote working, or remote learning, and it's easy to see why the subject of educational space is so important. This year, COVID-19 has, of course, shaken up approaches to learning as organisations adopt online methods, and it has also shaken up estate redevelopment plans. Our panellists will be discussing how best to tap into current and future opportunities and how to create exciting and sustainable education environments. So without further ado, let's kick off. To start with, David Harland, Chief Executive of Eden Project International, is going to present an update on the charity's Eden Project North, which is a major education and leisure attraction planned for Morecambe in collaboration with Lancaster University. Over to you, David, if you could turn your own camera and mic on.
I can. Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. From the far west, the wild west down here in Cornwall, and well, it's actually rather sunny and lovely here. I'm going to try and share my screen now with you all. I am also a Remo virgin. Hopefully you are seeing that, and a nice image of Morecambe and what we hope to do there. What I thought I'd do this morning is just take you through a little bit of history of Eden, why we're in the northwest, and what we're trying to do, and particularly with an eye on education and the rest. So just a quick history is our journey actually started at a place called Helligan. which was a garden that had been deserted at the start of the First World War, and then all the soldiers didn't return. And our founder Tim, who's there on the right, transformed that into the second most popular garden in Cornwall. And it tells the story very much of the workers rather than the lords and ladies of the manor. Fantastic, productive garden there. But out of that, what the team there realised was that Cornwall had a rich history of mining down the years. So we'd had lead and copper and tin, and then china clay. And when I was growing up down here, what you saw was a lot of this stuff. So the scars of mining, having removed the china clay. And then at that time, they had no ability to turn it from white to green. And what we thought that we could do with Eden was that if you could take a place that was hopeless, that was derelict, that had been used up by humans, and that you could breathe new life into it, then you could get into a conversation about our relationship with the natural world. And that is what Eden is actually about. Our mission, if you will, is to remind people that we're a part of the natural world, not apart from it, and that we only get one ecosystem, and we perhaps ought to look after it. But we try to do it in a slightly different way. We try not to preach at people, and we try to tell stories about the natural world. And so what you've got at Eden, if you haven't been, is you've got the largest plant conservatories in the world, one of which houses an enormous rainforest. Across the site, we've actually probably got the world's best collection of economic plants, i.e. the plants that help us live our lives. So things like rubber and cocoa and bamboo and so on. But actually what we also try to do is that we wanted to appeal to audiences that wouldn't normally come to a garden. So there's arts and the sculpture and the zip wires, and we run these rock gigs, or at least we did pre-COVID. So we're looking forward to 2021 and getting back to normal with those. And all of this, as you know, in the far southwest of the UK, a long way from anywhere. It's a bit of a pilgrimage to get here. And then if you like numbers, this slide gives you some sort of sense of what we've been doing for nearly 20 years. Actually, our 20th anniversary is in March next year. And numbers that we're particularly proud of are, of course, things like the economic impact and the number of visitors that we've had. But actually, the thing that makes Eden is things like that local purchasing number, which we will bring to the Northwest as well, which is that we buy more than 80% of our goods locally. We will even pay more if people can demonstrate why it costs more to source things there locally. And then, of course, we have our own education centre here. Pre-COVID, we're doing 52,000 visitors, 52,000 pupils on formal visits. And we now also have a set of degree programs here in collaboration with Plymouth University, mainly focus on horticultural science and the environment. When you think about education, one of the things that is key about the things that we want to do is we want people to understand the world around us. And so what you're seeing on screen at the moment is a ceramic sculpture, the largest ceramic sculpture on planet Earth, which is of a cyanobacteria, which were the first oxygen-giving bacteria on planet Earth. And I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I'm going to try anyway. That what it does is it blows out these rings of oxygen to really get people talking about the natural world and reminding them again that all these little things that we can't see around us are influencing our lives and ensuring that we can stay on this planet. And it's that sort of thing that we want to bring to our other sites. I hope that worked, by the way, but I'll find out afterwards. And then we are now working on a large number of projects across the world, and they all focus on different themes. So some of them focus on food safety and food security, some of them focus on the marine environment. And just a very quick snapshot, our big site in China is in Qingdao, which takes a degenerated site and focuses on the theme of water. That will open in 2023. So ground is broken, and that site is being worked on. We are the creative directors for what is called now the Terra Pavilion, the main Emirati pavilion for what was Dubai Expo 2020, now Dubai Expo 2021. And that building that you see is entirely is aimed to be entirely off-grid, both in terms of water and power for the period of Expo when that happens. And then we have another project here in Australia in a former coal mine. As it happens, we send a lot of pictures of derelict mine. We tend to avoid them, but this one was about how we could drive community change after the mining company had gone. And I just liked this image, if I'm honest with you, so I thought I'd put it in. But our most important site, of course, is in the northwest, and it genuinely is our number one priority to get Eden Project North in Morecambe up and running. And I'm very often asked two questions. Why Morecambe? We are almost always asked. And also, how come you happen to be there? And actually, the truth is that it was Lancaster University that first drew our attention to the area. And I confess, when the call came in originally, we were pretty skeptical as to whether we wanted to do something there. But as we got to know the area and the site, we realised that there was huge potential. Not least the history of Morecambe. What you're seeing here is the sort of the emblem of Morecambe. Rather lovely, isn't it? Beauty surrounds and health abounds, and that comes from the 19th century, when Morecambe was a place that you went to escape the mills and the mines, and you went to take the air, and you also went to the end of the pier to, if you like, get a taste of the exotic. And then we all know what kind of happened to British seaside resorts over the course of the late 20th century, was that cheap air travel meant that we no longer had to go to the end of the pier to see the exotic. In fact, you could just fly and see it. So many places, and Morecambe is one of them, sort of slowly and sadly withered a little. And as we got to know Morecambe a bit more, we realised that there is this amazing natural resource all around us, which is the bay. And actually, most people walking along that seafront there have no idea what is happening every 5 or 6 hours, how the rhythms of the planet actually, and both the lunar and the earth rhythms are linking in with us as humans. And there's just a fantastic amount going on, and we were inspired to be able to tell that story. But also, when you stand in Morecambe and you look out at the bay, it's beautiful. It's got the lakes in the background. It's just stunning. The water comes in quicker than a racing horse. But behind you, you've got a town that it would be fair to say has seen better days. And the bit of graffiti that you're seeing online there has stuck with us. It was a picture taken by one of the team. We felt it was a bit of a subliminal message about making sure that we really did do the right thing for Morecambe. And indeed, if you just look at the stats, and I won't go over these too much, there is significant deprivation that is happening, and that is not only financial, it's how it affects people's lives. The next slide here just talks about how it then impacts on health and well-being, and then the impact that has. So it does drive low employment and lesser life expectancy, but also it starts to ebb away at people's hope. And it starts to ebb away that actually, do you know what, good things don't happen in this place. And part of what we're trying to do is to bring back a little bit of hope into the area, and to allow people to have agency within their own lives. So look, what are we trying to do? If you like, healthy people, healthy landscape, and bringing together the best of what we've learned down here, but with quite a lot of something new. If you want the outcomes that we're trying to get to, we started on the basis that we really felt there was a story to tell about reinventing what we felt was the 21st century seaside resort. And so while, Eden North will, we hope appear on the front of magazine covers all around the world because of the sort of icon that we're hoping to create there, what we really want is that we want to embed it within its community and to drive change across the region and the north of England. And it fits in, as you can see there, into much wider aspirations around things like levelling up, around the creation of jobs, around getting people to actually want to come here from all over the world. Just briefly, again, why this location? This is, there's a lot of people that live in this area, whereas there's 500,000 people within an hour or so's drive from me here in Cornwall. Here, there's something like 10.5, 10.6 million people. They're great connectivity, fantastic actually number of schools. This stat of 472 schools within 25 miles was eye-opening, as well as a genuinely world-class university in Lancaster, a college with aspirations as Lancaster and Morecambe College there, and many other bits of quite, if you like, useful infrastructure around the northwest and the north of England there as well. So what are we going to do? Just really quickly here, if you know Morecambe, this is the site of what was called Bubbles, I think, long ago. It's right on the seafront. This gives you a sense of how we're trying to embed this into the community, and next to the Midland Hotel there at the sort of south of the picture here, the bottom of the site. What will people see when they go in there? Well, we're keeping that slightly under wraps, but it is, if you like, if you've been to Eden in Cornwall, one of the zones looks very much like the Mediterranean that we have here, although with a different set of species. The other is a series of black box type experiences that reveal what's actually going on around us and within the bay. I could talk for hours about what was actually happening there, but the key here is that we're trying to integrate this into the public realm as well. And then, you know, we're at the moment we're in dialogue with government about how does this fit into a wider, you know, set of aspirations that they have. And this project ticks a lot of boxes, whether it's tourism, whether it's about sustainable growth and what's now called green collar jobs, the partnerships that are happening with you know, Net Zero North, trying to develop a skills hub within this site as well. And actually the bottom point there is really important to us. Very early on we got into a conversation with Lancaster and Morecambe College to sign a 25-year agreement, because we're really deadly serious about, if you like, eradicating educational poverty, because we feel that's how we will get people to really benefit from Eden and all of the investment that will go around it. So look, I'm going really quickly here, but this is a project that is basically shovel ready. We're already working in the region along with our friends at Lancaster University and the colleges. You know, there are already you know, some benefits that are clear when you start to read the statistics of Eden coming to town. We've got involved with how we use the you know, all of the infrastructure around us, the high streets and so on and so forth. And then in the long term, clearly, as I just said, part of this is about that you know, that all of those changes that give people agency within their lives. But it does create jobs. It really does allow people to focus on the environment. It does improve the community, and we hope it will become an exemplar actually for how to do this across the country. And when if you wondered, do people want this in Morecambe? Crikey, do they want it? We feel a very extreme amount of pressure from the public in Morecambe, because they have been so supportive. They really have been right behind us from the early days. We've done a fantastic amount of community engagement, and there's some amazing groups locally doing fantastic work who we're partnering with. All of this is available on our website. Again, if you like numbers, this just gives you a snapshot of what we're aiming for. You know, this is a big scheme. It's a complex scheme. It's a lot of visitors coming into the area, but actually what we've learned through COVID is that we can manage that through timed entry and so on. So it's been one of the few good things about the pandemic has been that we've actually changed our operation here and tested some things that we wanted for Morecambe. And that's a really boring Gantt chart, but showing how we get there. So, you know, all sorts of procurement and you know, how we appoint the consultants and so on. And then finally, just to say, oh, I missed that slide, was that this is definitely not possible if we don't have really genuinely strong partnerships up with our friends, and we've had amazing support from the City Council, the County Council, and the Let, as well as the university as well, and many others besides. But I will stop sharing the screen there. I hope that gives you a nice intro to the day and gives you a sense of what we're trying to do.
Thanks, David. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really interesting to hear all of that detail on Eden Project North and how it will educate people about the natural world. And it's a really good introduction to our next panel discussion. So we're going to be exploring the outlook for the development of schools, universities and other education providers, and how to plan and deliver successful schemes. So I'd like to welcome to the stage our other speakers, Victoria Shepherd, Bid Manager and Education Sector Lead at Wilmot Dixon, Natalia Maximova, Associate Partner at Shepherd Robson, Jeremy Hines, Director at Savills, and David from Untitled International.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Jeremy, I'd like to start with you, if I may. Where are the biggest opportunities in education at the moment? For example, secondary schools or universities? And in which areas is the market more challenging? Is it estate consolidations or expansion projects that are most common at the moment?
I think across the board, education's facing a multiple number of challenges and different directions. And as you said in your intro, Sarah, the reality behind the education sector is it's enormously diverse and very, very wide. And most people, when they think about property and challenges presented by the education sector, tend to think firstly about universities, largely because of their scale and because of the presentations they make in terms of university estate plans. But there are, just to put it into context, there are 117 universities in England, and there are 24,000 schools, and there are 3.4 thousand. There's 3,400 secondary schools. And so there's a huge number of primary schools, which obviously by their sheer number and scale are a completely different order of magnitude. And so I think it's important to understand how the pathways about education connect right the way from primary through to universities, and how each of those elements of the education sector can provide for different needs of community requirements, and how they can become embedded as part of local communities and what local communities want from their education sector. And we can't forget the importance of secondary schools in particular, providing significant focal points for young people, from being young people to young adults, and the changes they go through. And some of the interesting points about David Harland's presentation was the nature by which projects such as Eden can be both embedded in the community, but also embedded with the education sector as well. And I think the linkages between business and education in that sense, as well as Eden Project in itself being an education initiative, they provide a very good model on how the challenge for education is to enable communities to come together in both an educational aspect as well as a business aspect. And I don't think we can't forget the importance of secondary education provided for both by state and independent sectors, and what that means. One of the big challenges for state secondary education, I just put this interesting stat out that I only discovered this morning in Venice, is that the average amount of expenditure per pupil in the state sector is £4,700 per year. And that is almost exactly the same figure as is the average cost to educate, or the fee charged by the independent sector per term. So basically the independent sector is a financial model that has to work, but that's how much it costs to educate the secondary sector properly, i.e. 3 times more than we are investing, and the amount of investment has to increase. But what does that mean in terms of provision? What does it mean in terms of facilities? What does it mean in terms of buildings? Those are big questions, but that's the sort of gap that we as a nation need to face up to.
Sure. Okay. So taking that cost point, Jeremy, are we seeing more estate consolidations, particularly given the current climate, or actually is there still an awful lot of development and expansion of estates going on?
Yeah, there is. We can see anecdotally there's a lot of investment into the state sector as well as the independent sector. One of the consequences of the COVID-19, though, has to make stark some of the difficulties that the state sector has compared to the independent sector in terms of online learning. And it'll be interesting to see, for example, how the likes of David Harland's team can help invest in local communities to encourage online learning. I mean, to put it almost in a sort of caricature way, it's fine and dandy for well-funded independent schools to invest in technology for their pupils, where it is highly likely that pupils will have access to computers and so on and broadband at home. But how does that relate to pupils in multi-storey tower blocks on the 13th floor, where they may not have a family computer, or there is only one computer, and so on. So there are real challenges, and one of the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic has been to expose some of the disparities between online learning and investment in modern technology. And I think actually one of the big plus points we can get from David's presentation is that Morecambe is very much a forgotten part of the Northwest, let alone the UK. And for people who have been there, and I don't mean this in any way disparagingly to Morecambe, but it has got a highly is a seafront in need of significant investment. It's been second fiddle at best to Blackpool for a long time. And so for this sort of advanced regeneration and renewal is a significant step forward for Morecambe. And I think hats off to companies like Eden for investing in communities that have frankly been left behind far too long. And it should encourage people in order to invest in the infrastructure required to allow pupils across communities to engage in the agenda that now is about technology, communications, online learning and participation.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Jeremy. A lot of good points there, many of which I want to explore in a bit more detail later on in our discussion. Victoria from Wilmot Dixon, I'd like to come on to you. Wilmot Dixon is working on a range of education projects. We've got Manchester College, Oldham College. I'm sure you can tell us a little bit more about them. So I wonder if you could just give us a brief overview of some of the schemes that are current for you at the moment that you're on site with. And I'm also wondering, you're at the front end of the bidding process, and you particularly handle the bids for the company. Have you noticed a drop-off in work at all because of COVID, or are projects still continuing pace? What's really been the knock-on impact on contractors, do you think?
Yeah, thank you. Morning, everyone. So yeah, as Sarah said, we've got lots of education projects on site at the moment, with a mixture of schools, colleges and universities. One is the Manchester College City Centre campus, which is right in the centre of Manchester, on the former Boddington's Brewery site, so next to the arena, a very sort of prominent city centre location, and that's going to deliver media and creative studies, so a really sort of a key project within the centre of the city. A few other projects we're delivering at the moment. We're working with Liverpool John Moores University, doing a part new build, part refurbishment for them. We've got a couple of colleges on site, so we're working with Tameside College, delivering a new construction centre, and also Oldham College as well. That's a second project that we're doing for them, Block D, and that's also a construction focus centre as well. And then high schools, we're doing Castle Allen has just started on site in Flintshire, so a real sort of mixture of projects on site in terms of education at the moment. And I think in terms of the impact of COVID, so for sort of my role at the front end of the business, as Sarah said, we're very busy, very busy. We haven't really seen any impact on pipeline. We've got lots of projects still coming through the many frameworks that we're on. If anything, I would say in the last sort of 3 to 6 months, we've probably seen an increase in secondary school tenders. So we've got sort of a lot of those coming through, which is really positive to see. Obviously demonstrating that there is still investment in the education sector, and responding to the growing population of Manchester. Maybe a couple of projects sort of delayed slightly in the tender period, but predominantly most of the projects have still sort of come through the pipeline, which is really positive to see. And then in impact to sort of on-site projects, we responded quite quickly to the pandemic and sort of implemented new ways of working on site. So we've got lots of things on site, like temperature scanners on arrival, one-way systems, staggered shifts, staggered breaks, so that our site teams and supply chain have been able to continue to work safely. And because of that, we've been able to keep all of our sites open. So, mitigating any delays for our customers, and operating at an operating level of 98%, in comparison to pre-COVID levels. So not really much impact on the live projects either, really, which is again really, really positive.
Brilliant, thanks, Victoria. I think that is really positive, isn't it? I mean, construction was sort of one of the first industry areas to sort of really get back to work, even before a lot of other industries opened up again in the summer. And it's been sort of full steam ahead, really, hasn't it? And that's great to see. And I think you mentioned before this event as well that actually the quiet period, the lockdown period, enabled you to actually press ahead with some kind of on-site projects, perhaps even faster than you would have done otherwise, because maybe there weren't students in those buildings, they weren't currently being occupied, for example.
Yeah, the Liverpool John Moores is an example of that, because it's within a live building. So obviously, as students weren't there, we were able to sort of get a bit of a ahead on the programme, which is a positive, I suppose.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks. Natalia, Shepherd Robson has worked with Lancaster, Liverpool universities. It's also on the ID Manchester Innovation District, among other schemes. How are architects responding to, the current environment, current challenging environment, perhaps? Are some projects having to be redrawn, redesigned to factor in, changes and sort of new trends, this rise in sort of remote learning? Is that happening? And perhaps you can sort of also draw in, to tell our audience a bit about the projects that you're working on at the moment.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, it's very interesting times indeed. And we have been looking at the projects we already completed, how they could be adapted to the new situation, new environment. And we certainly including this element of current situation to our projects that we are designing at the moment. And we have been really busy in the region. Just reminded myself last night how many projects we've done across all major cities. Liverpool John Moores just been completed, the student life building and sports building during the lockdown. Earlier on, two library refurbishments, again for the same university. Student halls of residence, a green bank for the University of Liverpool. And one of the projects for the University of Liverpool is at stage 2. That particular project, the School of Environmental Science, was paused during summer, so while the university could regroup and revisit their business case, but it's back on now, which is great news. As you mentioned, Manchester University, we are looking at the refresh of their master plan and helped the university to create a vision for the North Campus ID Manchester. And in terms of the challenges, so we did revisit some of the buildings, some of the educational facilities to test how those spaces could perform in a reduced capacity and what measures could be taken by the estates, by the university to protect students and staff. With regard to the new projects, it's a clear circulation pattern, an opportunity to create separate circulation routes. That's definitely something that all universities are looking for. Student halls and student residences, one of the key factors is the opportunity, again, to separate groups and also to offer outdoor spaces. That's really important. This is something that started before the lockdown and has been accentuated by the lockdown, is the well-being of students and staff. And we're certainly looking at it very seriously, so that everything we design should contribute to strong mental health and well-being of students. And green spaces, outdoor spaces, part of it, really, really important. And as you can see, universities recognize that too. Manchester University trying to create pockets of greenery within their estates. But University of Salford, for example, where we've got a project on site at the moment, School of Engineering, it's got a great asset of the park. Again, that would definitely be a unique selling point for the university.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Okay. I think certainly that the health and wellness agenda is only going to become only going to become more sort of important, and we'll actually be discussing that as well in our second panel. David, the sector is highly competitive, as we've touched on, and organisations really have to understand the value of their facilities and how they reflect and sort of enable the activities that are going to take place within them. Obviously, that involves close collaboration with the institutions that you're working for. Can you tell us a bit about the specific lessons that you've learned on partnership working from your collaboration with Lancaster University?
Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about partnership, don't they? And how that sort of works. And not many places are actually particularly good at it. And I have to say, bigging up my friends and colleagues at Lancaster University, they have acted genuinely in partnership throughout this. And partly that was to do with, I think, a coming together of a shared vision of something that was going to really make a difference. Actually, everybody's pulling in the same direction. Wanting to, if you like, do good. One thing I forgot to say, by the way, when I was talking was, 20 years ago, the technology that we brought in here at Eden was seen as innovative. What's really disappointing is it's still seen as innovative 20 years on. Which either means that we were brilliantly ahead of the game or the world hasn't moved on that much. And I suspect it's probably the latter, sadly. And so what we wanted to do in all of the partnerships that we have in the North was to challenge not just us, but to challenge our architects, to challenge the QSs, to challenge actually the educational partners to genuinely do good. The days, if you like, where you could do, you remember the Nike slogan of "Do no harm." That was kind of 1990s, wasn't it? So whereas now what we need is we need our buildings to actually be acting in the right way. We need to drive those educational offers to do good. And that's why I think our partnership with Lancaster has worked so well. And then, of course, they have expertise that we simply don't have. And they've got academics who are interested very often in both the big and the small. One of the problems that we see in the world today is that we're terribly focused on a lot of people have become very, very specialist. And actually, we want people to remember that the whole is what, and holism is what is going to get us out of some of the problems that we're in. And I think Lancaster shared that vision, and partly, they'd invested in things like their ESI and their the Sustainability Institute there and the Health Innovation Campus, which are all brilliant building blocks, and they were really happy to share their experiences doing that. So that's a bit of a waffly answer, but in essence, it is about every partnership that we've ever had at Eden has been about shared ambition and a shared vision to go and change something. And if you get that right, then you can you keep moving forward through thick and thin. And one final thing to say is that there was a terrible moment in the project for Morecambe, which was that almost everybody who'd been involved at the start of the project and had been with it through its feasibility suddenly changed jobs or left. That's a disaster when you're trying to develop something like this. And what actually happened is that, at the LEP and at the university, all the people that we then got involved as if you like, the next set of people were just as enthusiastic because we'd actually embedded that partnership through that and has driven it forward. So that's that shows the strength of a good partnership.
Thanks, David. Looking at a different sort of partnership or different sort of collaboration, and that's what you were talking about earlier, Jeremy. This state versus private sector thing, and you mentioned before the event as well when we spoke that COVID has exposed these stark differences in remote learning provision between the two sectors, partly related to the availability of technology and other equipment. Can you perhaps elaborate on that? And do you think it's possible for the two sectors to work together to build up innovation and improve the quality of education, both online and in actual spaces?
Yeah, very much. I don't count. I wouldn't, and I always try and shy away from the nature of the relationship as one versus the other. I know from a journalistic point of view it can be presented as such, but I don't think actually it's fair to do that. The reason I drew attention at the end of my little piece of the introduction to the disparity of resources, the 4.7 figure, is because one of the difficulties we have as a nation is how do we fund that gap? It's very, very difficult when there are so many calls on the nation's resources. And so the independent sector has taken it upon itself to engage constructively with local communities about taking in pupils, but also trying to find innovative ways to engage with communities, use their buildings and resources in ways that might not be possible for the state sector to do. Because we have to remember the independent sector is able to take a management decision about the use of its buildings itself. It doesn't have to relate those decisions back to a hierarchy at local government level and go through a process there. So the independent sector is more flexible in that respect, and that flexibility allows it to engage with communities both outside of the immediate educational environment but also elsewhere within that as well. So I think there are significant opportunities available for the two sectors to work together. One of the biggest problems I think that faces, and it is a big challenge for the state-funded sector, is and it's not just a resources question. It's also a physical presence location. Some of the buildings are in need of repair. Some of them are on school sites in urban locations are on constrained locations or constrained sites. And so, how do you provide for the wide range of facilities on a constrained urban site? Do you move the facility completely out of the urban area into, say, a greenfield site or something? And do you then break the relationship? Or do you look at a number of schools, state-funded schools, and say they can provide almost in a collegiate way the facilities that may be provided for by a single entity independent school, for example? So there are some big problems, but picking on one or two comments by David, I think one of the ways forward on this is to recalibrate the value. And I think it is increasingly understood that education provides for human capital, and therefore it justifies investment on its own terms. But the social value of education in terms of the buildings that are providing an education experience do not have the same value as, say, a capital value. And so trying to find the relationship between a new value that allows society to understand the social value of buildings and the human capital investment education provides for is a way forwards to allow both the state sector to invest more, as well as for the independent sector to collaborate, both with business and business and independent sectors have a greater tendency to collaborate for different reasons than might the state sector, but they can actually work together and are increasingly doing so.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Jeremy. I mean, linked to this is also this concept of opening up some educational facilities to the public for commercial purposes. Attempts have been made. It hasn't always been sort of easy, but there's been attempts made in, for example, sports centres, gyms, to sort of really help maximise the value of that land and property. Natalia, perhaps you would like to come in on that, because you're obviously working at Manchester North. You're looking at really using an education institution to play a bigger role in driving inward investment and sort of commercialise the area. Would you like to talk a bit about that and what you think of the opportunities there? And the challenges there.
Yes, I think there are definitely an opportunities there. One of the examples I wanted to bring, it's slightly outside the region, but this is something that will come closer to home soon. It's the joint venture between the University of Birmingham and Brentwood. It's an interesting project we're creating for these two entities, joint research facilities. Sort of labs that are quite flexible and could accommodate research and move industry forward, as well as being used for educational purposes. And this is a great example how higher education and industry can meet. And Brentford being a local player, I'm sure this sort of trends will be brought here to Manchester and Liverpool. So there are certainly opportunities, and ID Manchester, this is a good stage for private sectors to step in, be it research facilities or offices, where the universities act as a sort of co-developer, if you wish. And I think even the contractors could be more creative with how they approach the financial model for the projects. So the development wings of the construction companies could act as investors in those projects, and opportunities are certainly there. And very often the locations are really appropriate for this sort of mix, collaboration, city centre locations, sites. The universities, we see the trend of their estates being consolidated. And I think for various purposes, be it sustainability or easy management, but also opportunity to release the sites. And that's where the collaboration and investment opportunities will be created, and we'll see more of that coming. Definitely, I mean the university's approach to the development is changing. So they're not just sort of solo provider facilities. They really welcome private sector to join in.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Natalia. Your video is slightly frozen, but I haven't been stopping you because your audio is fine. But if you have any problems, maybe feel free to turn off your video entirely if you're worried about any bandwidth. But yeah, we can hear you fine. So
yes, that's great. One more thing I wanted to add, and that's again where the opportunities to introduce new technologies is the sustainability. It hasn't gone away with COVID. In fact, it probably has been brought up to the agenda even more so in recent bids, in recent projects. I think it's again, this is where the local authorities cooperate with the universities, and industry can and private partnership can certainly help that too. It's just most major cities have set up quite ambitious agendas with regard to reduced carbon or zero carbon, and universities being higher education being one of the major developers in the regions can certainly contribute to that. We're hearing more and more about aspiration, but it's for us, for the industry, to actually deliver it, because it educate the clients. I think passive house is certainly coming to universities, not just a domestic or house environment that we are going to introduce it. It's lab buildings I've mentioned before. It's educational buildings that will be trying to deliver projects with passive house accreditation. And I think it's great news as well. So it's definitely not forgotten part of the current topics, current agenda.
Great, thanks, Natalia. Yes, I was going to ask you about sustainability. Actually, it's something I'd like to ask David about. But just to rewind slightly, I'd like to pick up with Victoria on the contractor point that you made earlier about potential new funding models. Victoria, do you have any comment to make on Natalia's point?
I don't know whether it's one that I would be best placed to answer, to be honest, in terms of funding. It's something we have seen in bids, sort of models where education customers are maybe utilising combined research space. That's definitely something we've kind of seen in the pipeline quite recently. Other than that, I'm not sure, I'm afraid, sorry.
Yeah, no problem at all. And actually related to that then, and related to the whole agenda for sort of encouraging inward investment and, involving the private sector, I think this relates to an idea about the quest for prestige. Perhaps this is particularly among universities who often want their teaching and research space to look like, high-end offices or something. And I wonder, Victoria, is this sort of flexibility of space becoming more important as the market gets increasingly crowded? And how easy is that to build it into the scheme?
I think flexibility of space has always been important, hasn't it? I think, talking about that prestige, I think the Manchester College project is a really good example of that, because the customer was really keen on having a very prominent city centre location. It was really important to them. I mean, partly because of the sort of the presence it creates for them as a brand, but also because it makes it very accessible. So students from all across Manchester can travel to the campus, and that as a building is a really sort of stunning building. The design of it looks fantastic. Some of the CGIs that we've got, and I was down there on site the other day, seeing the frame going up, and really excited about seeing the facade going on, because it's a very stunning building for an education building. It will very much fit in with the buildings around it in the city centre. It's quite a striking, impressive building, and I guess that's that sense of prestige.
Brilliant, thanks Victoria. David, I'm going to come back onto the environmental sustainability point. How straightforward have you found so far the process of embedding environmental sustainability into the actual planning and kind of construction process? Clearly drawing on your experience, not just in Morecambe, but in other areas.
Yeah, I mean, look, what an interesting question. We obviously have things like our sustainable design brief, and the overarching sort of policies that we use here. What we're trying to do with Morecambe is slightly different, which is to look just more widely. And by the way, the planners and the authorities up there have been genuinely helpful. And the relationship is good, because I think everybody shares an aspiration to try and sort out things like transport. And nobody's ever tried, for example, to it's all very well us making your visit, if you like, I use the word green in inverted commas, or sustainable, but does that include how you got to Eden? And so we've started to think about those type of measures as well. And we're very influenced by one of our ambassadors for the project, who is Bill McDonough, who the architects will know on this call. One of America's finest architects wrote a book called Cradle to Cradle. And his whole mantra with us has been, you've got to do good with these buildings. It's no longer good enough, as I said earlier, to just do no harm. But there's also a sort of change in language and a change in emphasis that we want to bring, which is, if you said to someone, you were describing your relationship and you said, well, it's sustainable, isn't it? It doesn't sound that good, does it? And so there's a sort of sense that we have as well, that we've got to change the language of sustainability as well, so that it becomes clear that it's actually the thing that allows us to continue to live our lives and so on. And we don't want to be, finger wagging prophets or anything. We want people to have a good time as well, but just to show them that things can be different. And I think COVID, by the way, the one thing that it might well have shown us is, not only are we all rather interconnected across the world quite clearly, but it's also shown that we can probably demand the society and the communities that we actually wanted coming out of this. If we all stand together and say, no, we don't want to go back to the same old. And it's all very well having straplines like build, 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 but actually we should all be on at our MPs and writing to them and saying, look, do you know what we want? We want educational campuses that deliver. We want Eden project style things. Of course, I'd say that, wouldn't I? We want, we want to genuinely build back better. And can we get into a discussion as to what that really means? I'll stop ranting now, Sarah.
No, that's fine. Rants are always good. But yeah, no, thanks, David. Amazingly, we're actually running out of time, but we have had a question there from the audience. I would encourage you all in the next session, please send in your questions in, because we can weave them into the conversation. But Jeremy, I wonder if you would like to answer this one. How can universities engage with schools in areas beyond their own hinterland? And this relates to actually what you were saying right at the very beginning about how connected all the parts of the education process are or should be.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think this is a great question, and one I think really sort of paves the way for where we look for education to go next. And I do think, when I talked about pathways earlier, I do see the education sector finding sensible pathways that integrate secondary to tertiary education far more fully than at the moment. I mean, interestingly, an interesting figure, there are 693,695 students studying for UK degrees abroad. In other words, in universities that are UK universities, but located in another country. So if our university sector can have over 500,000 and will be approaching 1 million in a few years' time, students elsewhere studying at their universities. I don't think it's beyond the ability of our own universities to integrate within their own hinterlands, in their own hinterland being the UK, and look at developing campuses in close association with towns that are not their immediate town. So Manchester University could, for example, have some form of campus outside but elsewhere. It could, for example, try to work with Lancaster University and put something up in Morecambe, and they play to their own respective strengths accordingly. So I do think there are opportunities. The UK university sector has shown by its sheer numbers it can work outside of its own hinterland abroad. Why can't it do it in the UK?
Brilliant. I think that's a really, really good point. Thanks, Jeremy. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, folks. We've sort of rattled through a number of really big points, and I'm sure we could carry on for hours. But yeah, a virtual round of applause, please, to all of our speakers for a brilliant conversation, and to our attendees as well for your engagement. Could I ask you to please stay on for the networking break, and we'll be back for the second half presentation of panel at about 11:20. Let's now switch to networking mode. Thank you very much, and see you shortly.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, I've got a presentation, 10 minutes or so. I'll try and get through it. It's along the subject of obviously the design of educational environments, but it's almost like really talking about like a macro comment how the design of space maybe should be considered in a different way. I've spent the last 3 years working in education environment design, but prior to that, I spent 20 years working with brands all over the world, Adidas, Virgin, people like this, designing flagship stores and running the Ford Motor Show program. And so a lot of time working with how the design of space and design disciplines of communication and interaction design and these kind of things, how they're all integrated and orchestrated to create compelling experiences. And I've been looking at how that could apply to the education sector over the last 2 to 3 years. And this presentation is a kind of like a précis of a viewpoint to consider. So I'm going to turn my camera off and share screen. I hope you're all seeing Transforming the Campus now. So I want to talk about a new approach to campus design, one that is centered on the needs of users, is informed by progress made in other sectors such as retail, workplace, leisure and hospitality, and which is geared to emergent needs of a rapidly evolving world. I believe estate strategies and campus design requires a new approach, a new focus on giving students what they want, on building a campus on an experience that students like, where they want to spend time, where they feel they belong, and an experience that is preferable to being at home, but also an experience that is preferable to what's on offer at another university. This is crucial. It's crucial for any institution that is embroiled in an intake battle, whether that involves the task of exciting visitors on open day or earning ever more valuable approval and ratings from undergraduates year on year. For many institutions, the competition to attract learners has escalated over the recent years. And this year, all have witnessed this intensify because of COVID. It is a challenge that may yet begin to assert itself in the context of blending learning and one which heralds an existential threat should students elect to study entirely online. The campus experience is instrumental to survival. To protect the campus, you have to improve it. You have to redesign it. We know this is important because we've seen it occur in similar ways in other sectors where space and the design of space is used to build loyalty, to create differentiation, and to win. Businesses have thought this way since the 1950s. Globally, companies and organizations have understood that the design of space, the workplace, is essential in the battle to communicate their values and to attract and retain the best employees. And in the retail sector, every element that exists inside a store, from the lighting to the sound, graphic communication to smell and scent, from interactive systems to compelling stories, is considered in an integrated process to reinforce a customer journey, extending and enhancing identification with and loyalty to a brand, or more appropriately, a tribe, up to the point of purchase and beyond. Even if the product is barely different, the space is a completely differentiated experience. I know this because I've done this. You know, Nike and Adidas, their products, trainers, shirts, whatever, it can be very similar, but their stores are what makes them completely different. I personally have been directly involved in a lot of these examples I'm sharing with you. And in the hospitality sector, hotels, restaurants, cinemas, obsessive focus is placed on every detail that contributes to providing a uniquely enjoyable and desirable experience. This is the experience economy in action. So let's be clear, space has a purpose. This is not architecture, and this is not interior decoration. Space can be a powerful communication tool. It creates an experience. It builds meaning. Otherwise, we'd never be tempted to venture from our sofas. We'd always be eating, entertaining, shopping, and working from home. Today's undergraduates have grown up in a world that has been designed according to these principles. So just as workplace needs to strengthen its position against the threat of working from home, and as the leisure and hospitality sectors must somehow gear up to attract us out of our shrinking worlds, so we must also strive to protect the campus. We must design the insides of buildings in a way that considers the needs of the users in a different way. The practice of experience design employs a series of filters that helps us to consider the numbers of ways in which a space can affect human behavior. These include, should I say, how emotions are triggered, what happens over time. We recognize each of the senses. We take into account how the experience is hosted and how a narrative unfolds. New builds don't consider interiors nearly as much as they should do. How the communications, interactions, and behaviors we want to see will be affected over time. Mostly it is the new challenges and new commercial pressures that cause us to rethink and refocus how we use our spaces. And right now, new builds are paused. Plus, they are carbon inefficient and they are lengthy in gestation. So we're advocating a radical rethink in which estate strategies are refocused towards the effectiveness of refurbishments, where small increases in budget apportioned represents a low-cost, high-yield investment. An investment geared to a new economic reality, a new COVID-threatened CapEx program, where results, benefits from students' performance, well-being, and continued success are brought about and realized more quickly and in a more tangible and recognizable way. I'm certain we can do this. We've actually proven it's possible. We corrected a misstep taken by a client in Asia involved in a UK public schools international expansion plans, where they had focused on the outside and then realized that for users, it's the inside that makes all the difference. In order to create a space in which Wellington students in China, who are the client, could feel a connection to the original school, one could say the brand, we took as our starting point an abundance of visual references from the source. That included visual cues, as well as concepts relating to the school's values, traditions, and historic identity. We enhanced, extended, and adapted these to develop a new language from which we created an entirely new but relevant interior experience. By striving to establish a point of difference purely through the design of space, we delivered a completely unique experience applied across their entire campus, about which our clients can confidently claim, we don't feel like just another school. Eleanor Prescott, Principal, Wellington College International, Shanghai. From corporate, institutional, bland, to unique, formal, almost grandeur. This hugely affected our clients' ability to compete and stand out, to meet the needs of a new type of customer and the demands of an entirely different and very competitive market. From functional to inspiring, from durability to humanity, from institutional to peaceful, from practical to energetic. However, this is much more than about just attracting and winning customers. If we commit to designing from the inside out, we create spaces in which users feel at home. In this way, cognitive performance, productivity, innovation, and culture. It's about creating belonging. And we're not alone in coming to this realization. Catherine Riley, Professor of Urban Education at UCL, in her 2017 study, described belonging as lying at the intersection between space, agency, and relationships. And that designing for belonging was the difference between creating a world of uncertainty and untruth and a world of hope and possibilities. And the Stanford Design School's Belonging Project concluded that belonging is a feeling, not something that you can concretely design, but what you can concretely design is space, role, ritual, and processes. Designing space in this way drives performance of educators, students, and support staff. Belonging facilities flow, concentration, and a sense of purpose. To be clear, this approach can be applied to more than just the insides of campus buildings. The benefits of this approach could be brought to bear much more effectively and efficiently when considered across an entire campus. And so this is what I'm suggesting universities consider, that we collaborate in a new roadmap for estate strategies, which currently sits on pause and may soon prove to be redundant, that together we allow ourselves this moment to reappraise the entirety of campuses as an experience, not just a facility, and to put in place plans for redevelopment and refurbishment that are high-yield, low-cost development models that meet our emergent needs. It's not going to be easy. In order to change, we have reconsidered the old ways of doing things. We need to reconsider the old ways of doing things. Procurement pressures and processes are in place that support the traditional approach. And there are stakeholders for whom the process of changing hearts and minds will be difficult. But the recognition of this, the grasping of this opportunity has become my mission. It represents a chance to positively contribute to the happiness and success of the next generation. Thank you. Hello.
Hi,
Sarah.
Thanks so much for sharing that, David. That was a really fascinating overview of your work, and I think a very visual introduction to our next panel discussion, which will discuss how to future-proof education spaces for generations to come. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Rob Jones, Commercial Manager at Crossfield Group, Sue Ems, Principal of Architecture at BDP, and David Judge from Space Zero. If our speakers could activate their cameras and mics, please. We've got a few issues with Rob's camera, but his audio is fine. So we'll carry on as is, if that's okay with you all. A note to our audience, please do remember to submit any questions to our panel through the Q&A button, and we'll try and get through as many of those as possible. Sue, hi. I'd like to start with you. Hi. I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. Could you please just give us a brief overview of some of the regional projects that you're working on that maybe show some of the new and inventive ways that you're designing education space?
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you, Sarah. Fantastic talk, Dave. Amazing, thought-provoking in terms of what the experience of education is all about, and I think it will be very important in terms of the post-COVID education world, definitely. So, in terms of BDP, I'm based in Manchester. We're doing a lot in education, both regionally and nationally. People probably have seen recently our completed Alliance Manchester Business School for the University of Manchester, and we're also delivering MECD for the University of Manchester, which must be one of the largest education projects in Europe. We're also working with MMU. We worked on their estate strategy, and now we have 2 buildings, one on site, which is the Institute of Sport, and we're about to start on site with their science and engineering faculty. We also do lots of schools. We're working with a trust in Rochdale at the moment, looking at how we might refurbish a redundant sports hall to provide some additional education space, but not just teaching spaces and classrooms, but actually clever space in terms of multi-purpose space. And I think one of the areas I work in is master planning. So I've spent probably the last 10 years looking at numerous universities' master plans across the UK and internationally, and there are some real strong themes coming out in terms of some of our work, which I mean, COVID obviously has had a massive impact on the sector, not just financially, but in terms of the delivery of education. And I think most universities have been sort of just dealing with short-term issues in terms of getting education and getting terms up and running. But actually what it's done is it's accelerated education, and some of the things that universities had strategies for 10 years have actually come in now within 6 months. So I do think COVID does have an opportunity for the sector. So in terms of that and the trends we've been seeing, I think Dave's quite right. We need to look at estates, and there has to be a reason why we should be going to a physical campus now. A lot of universities have been very successful in sort of delivering that hybrid blended approach, but through our master planning, we're looking at why people go to campuses. And I'm working with a university at the moment that are being quite forward thinking in terms of their delivery of education, so much so that their physical estate could reduce by up to 40 to 50%, which is a huge impact. But it's not just the space that they lose, it's the space that they gain. And it has to be the right type of spaces. So I think we're going to see, and we're seeing that in some of our other projects that are currently on site, the idea of collaborative learning spaces, the reason you go, that sense of belonging that Dave talked about. So more collaborative, more multi-use spaces. So for example, on MMU, one of our labs is a super lab. So increasing the utilization of space by making them bigger, getting better infrastructure to them, to allow them to be used by lots of different users rather than just different disciplines. And I think in terms of the future of some of our buildings that we're looking at, we're definitely seeing sort of flexible, agile buildings. So buildings that aren't owned by anybody, but actually they're built around themes. So very much a technology focused building. We're looking at projects for universities where so for Sheffield Harland University, which I know isn't in our region, but it's quite a useful case study. We're looking at sort of creating active ground floors, buildings that can be used by students and the public, but then flexible floor plates above that can actually facilitate and adapt to change, because change is going to come. We're also looking at embedding commercial. So the idea that as student numbers grow and shrink and space demands change, we could lease them out for commercial uses. But actually putting businesses and students together in the same building has huge benefits. And I think we've seen that at our innovation hub for Keele University, where students and businesses are working hand in hand. They're using applied learning techniques, which means retention of knowledge is better, but actually they're developing the right skills for employability. So that idea of bringing businesses and industry working hand in hand in very applied and practical spaces is also a growing theme we're seeing in our projects as well. I could go on for a long time, but I feel I've probably said enough there in terms of I can expand on some of those issues.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of big points in there, Sue. Thanks for that. And yeah, it's a good overview of all of the sort of macro trends that are rippling through the sector at the moment, and you know, not just because of COVID. You know, trends that were actually on their way anyway before that. Rob, as a contractor in the education sector, I'd love to hear your response to both David's presentation and some of the comments that Sue's made just now in terms of how space is being sort of delivered and often repurposed. How practically deliverable are some of these concepts, do you feel?
Hi, thanks Sarah. Sue, David, you very, very well there in great detail of use of space, and yeah, it's a difficult balance with actually delivering from a construction point of view, because you can become, with this space being open, be careful of phrases here, but the open spaces, you have to ensure they're not too generically based, although they're enabling a future work platform to be, who knows what it might be in the future, especially during these times. You've got to make sure that the key stakeholders, so in our situation, the college or the clients, the university, the schools, we get a bespoke service really, that we take them along for the journey, and when we come in and become the contractor, a lot of work's already gone into schemes by the time we got at the table in terms of design and sort of how the space is going to be used. Our operation really is the delivery of it, and then we align ourselves with the design team to make sure we can deliver that vision to the quality and the standards meant to be delivered. So yeah, it's not, who knows what the future is going to tell, but at this moment in time, I think the prevailing sort of projects we look for is, when it comes to refurbishment natures or projects of that nature, the outside looking in, as David sort of alluded to the other way before, doesn't count as much. It really is the inside looking out and how they can make the most of the space to the benefit of what particular study or vocation of that sector is, or that building is going to be used for. It's difficult, but it's a balance. I keep going back to it. You've got to involve the stakeholder. Generally, when we come to the table, the client already knows what they want. They've already sat down with David or Sue or similar people to design an end product they are after. Our biggest thing is making sure we incorporate them and have a collaborative approach with everyone to the end result. And then, even though not just on delivery, time after. So a lot of our schemes, we come back, obviously contractually obliged to come back 12 months later, but it's good to come back and listen to sort of lessons learned, how things maybe have gone well or not so well. And predominantly what I'd say we're finding in the last, say, 3 to 5 years on schemes of this nature, I'll let you speak it, so you can't see me, apologies for the camera, but I think what we're finding in schemes of this nature is they seem to be having less issues after a 12-month period, due to I don't want to dumb down, but a simplicity of design, making it more open plan and making it more adaptable for the future. Yes, David.
Interesting. Yeah, David, do you want to come in on that? Just to make a point, Rob, your audio was slightly wobbly at the very beginning. It got better, I think you guys will agree. So just whatever you were doing at the end, stay in that position.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, David. Do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I was just, I suppose what I was trying to raise in the presentation is this notion that, to quote Henry Ford, you know, the classic, if you ask people what they want, they'd want faster horses. I genuinely believe that there is within a lot, and I'm not saying all, and it's very easy to get generic here and to tar everyone with the same brush, and that's not what I'm saying. There are some amazing people involved in universities and education, but I think there is, I think a lot of times when people are talking about the expansion of a state of the development, it becomes a very functional discussion very quickly. And I think what I'm championing is that I think there's a discussion that's much more emotional, that's much more connected to the psychology, the state of mind of the students, of how they enjoy what the facility is providing, And I think that universities find that difficult to have that conversation because it feels very unfamiliar to them. So I don't think it gets briefed in. I don't think it gets really discussed. I think it's there when, you know, when you build a coffee shop, obviously it should feel a bit relaxed. But I think in general, conversations get very functional very quickly, which answers a lot of questions. And of course, things have to be built to a high standard and, you know, on time, and there are budget restrictions and all of these things. But there's just a layer of conversation that I think could be the answer that people are really looking for. And it's so much more important now, as Sue said, you know, to getting students back into campus was difficult before COVID. Getting them back in now is even more important. So what is it that's going to make them go, I love being here, I love that place, I love spending time there, rather than saying, I've got to go in because I need my X 3D printer, or I need that lab, or I need that thing. So they rather than just going for facilities, that they're going because they feel a deep connection with that space, the tribe that are there, the university, it's how its relationship, you know, that belonging idea, agency, as in how you have control over this thing, what your involvement with this thing is, and relationship to who's providing this space for you. And actually, when the person that's providing the space, if you take the example of, I don't know, Everyman Theatres or Yo Sushi or whatever, you know, they concentrate on you feeling looked after, you know, the way they smile, everything they do is to give you a great time. Whereas actually in institutions, they tend to back off and go, we just need to give them the facility where to put their seat, where to put their books, where to get Wi-Fi. And there's something in between. I'm not saying that all universities should be designed like Wagamamas, you know, we should, you know, that we should spoil the students with some kind of Gucci, you know, university. That's not what I'm saying. There's something in between. And I just don't think it gets considered enough. I may be wrong. I mean, Sue, tell me if you
No,
genuinely think I'm wrong.
I think the design, procurement, and construction of university projects is overly complicated, and design can often get watered down through the stages. So I don't think you're wrong. You know, I think looking to the future, universities are going to have to up their game in terms of the online learning, because at the moment what they're trying to do is have a traditional model delivered in a new way. And if they don't increase the experience of that, we'll get the Netflix, the TikToks of this world, the Googles sort of becoming the new education institutions. So there's something around that universities to address, but there has to be a reason to go to a physical estate, and that is all about the event, the experience. There are obviously some practical subjects that do need specialist facilities, you know, and they need to be state-of-the-art specialist facilities. I think, you know, it made me laugh this week when one of my graduates tweeted $9 grand to sit in a studio bed flat watching a man drink a cup of tea on telly. You know, and so universities are going to have to change, and it might be that, you know, with technology there is huge opportunities to get amazing scientists to come in and teach 2,000 students, you know, 1 million students all at once. So, you know, the way that education is going to be delivered is going to be different. It's also going to be delivered in a different time scale. The 3-year courses probably could disappear. The traditional semesters could disappear. People might come to university for block learning, and that affects physical estates hugely, especially around student accommodation. So the focus this year has been to fill the beds to get the money, but actually there's going to be a hotel version of student education being needed, where it's a bit more agile and flexible. You know, and when people do come for a 6-week block to university, that teaching experience is going to be very different. I think we're also going to see more collaborative courses in terms of the learn and earn at the same time, where people take modules when they want. It's on-demand education, and that's going to change the physical estate hugely. So COVID has been an impact, but it's a huge opportunity, and I think universities have to run with it. You know, it will move at a fast pace.
I'm interested to know, I guess, well, perhaps you could weave this into your answer actually as well, because I mean, Sue, you mentioned issues with the way education buildings are procured and delivered, right at the front end of the process. I'd like to ask Rob about that actually shortly, but I wonder what other kind of barriers there are, David. What do you see in the sector in terms of why is there this sort of resistance to moving away from an institutional approach?
I suspect it's, to Sue's point, it's complex, which means you've got a lot of people involved and a lot of people with different political views around what's important, what's not. I think in general, there is in the education sector in the whole, it feels to me that there's a general kind of, it worked for me. It was fine when I was at school. We don't need to spoil the bloody students. You know what I mean? Why do they need to be, and like a sense that they may be pampering to them in some way, and they're fine. Just give them a facility and they should do the work. You know what I mean? But actually, if you look at what's happened in the workplace sector, up until only about 5 years ago or 10 years ago, there was an awful lot of very big corporate headquarters that just had rows of desks and rows of meeting rooms. And why would anyone need anything else? That's absolutely fine. You can do what you need, sit at your desk and get on with your job. But actually, of course, now, if you look around most of the world's leading businesses, their headquarters feel like hotels. People work where they want, when they want. They have to make something that's better than being at home to get them to come into work. And when they're in work, they've got, it's like their leisure facilities where people can be their most relaxed, their most innovative, their most collaborative, you know what I mean? Now, businesses are understanding the value of that because it drives innovation, which through collaboration and through the best people staying in the company and the best people saying, I want to work there. I don't want to go and work in that boring old place that's just got a load of desks. I want to work in this fabulous place that just is so exciting. And I think that the workplace has shown a dramatic change in the design of environment and how people, because of mobile technology, and that's workplaces blending their learning, their working, and they've been doing it for the last 5 years. That's what happens when blended working hit the marketplace properly. The design of workplaces changed dramatically, and that's going to happen again now because of COVID. If you take activity-based working, the idea of somewhere to concentrate, somewhere to collaborate, somewhere to socialize, concentrate will now be home, and you'll just stay at home and concentrate because you've got a report to do, and you'll go into work to socialize and to collaborate, and work will become much more about excellence, center of excellence, improving what we're doing, getting better at what we're doing, getting you better at what you're doing, all these kind of things. So different places for different activities. Universities still seem to operate in a world of, you have a bunch of functional things that do certain things, and that's it. Whereas actually, I think the template for blended learning is what's happened within a lot of the leading workplaces around the world. And I think that's something to really look at. Institutionalization has just gone out the window.
I think that's really interesting, just drawing that parallel with the commercial world, with the office world. Rob, one of Crossfield's clients is Cardinal Newman College in Preston, a high-performing secondary school. So I wonder, taking with regard to these points that we've discussed, how do you think the quality of education provision there is reflected in some of the features of the building?
It's a good question, Sarah. Not knowing the full sort of educational parameters that the college operates under. But what I can say, it's a good point. I think what I can say from the experience we've had so far is understanding there seems to be a bit of a stigma in construction, or the word construction. I think most people who are on this today are part of a construction family, wider construction family. And I think it's just open. What we try to do, or strive to do, is create a partnership with all the sort of teaching facilities we work with. So City Liverpool College, Liverpool John Moores Uni, Hugh Bird, and now Cardinal Newman. And what we've already found is to make them understand that if you work in construction, it doesn't mean you lay brick or you're a joiner. You can have a vocational degree, or qualification that way, but also it opens up many avenues to the guys who were on this call, myself as a surveyor, all the team at Crossfield obviously went to John Moores University. engineers, the consultants, the numbers are infinite on the possibilities the construction can open its door to. So in a way, we find ourselves an approach we like to work with colleges and sort of secondary education facilities, and it works quite well, is we almost educate the educators, because these guys don't know, and that's fine if they're just not aware of it. So just we try to embrace that sort of partnership with the guys, and then how we practically put that into practice on site is when we have a design team meeting or design team workshop, we'll invite the college to attend or send their students to attend. We've actually took on 3 people now in Crossfield through various secondary organisations on apprentice degrees in university. And these guys just didn't realise the world was out there for them. Myself personally, none of my family had a background in construction. I was lucky enough to fall into it through college and through school myself. So we're more centric to, I say, working in partnership with the facility, with the college. They have their syllabus, they have their core sort of competencies that they're good at delivering, and that this college in particular is a fantastic institute. But I think we've already opened the door to some of their students there to understand, wow, the world of construction. No one on this call needs to be talked about the skill shortage and sort of the industry seems to be, I'd say in the time I've been in it, it's not really changed that much yet, say in 20 years. Why? When all the other sectors or the other industries are flying, technology is being implemented across the board, and I'm sure David and Sue will correct me on some.
Oh,
Rob
dropped out for a minute.
Correct you on one,
I
Rob.
got a bit bored. I don't know where that dropped out. Then I was flying as well.
It dropped. It dropped off as you were saying that you're sure that they'll correct you on a point.
Oh, and then that was quite an opportune moment then to go off. It was just the fact of, obviously, I was saying the way we, certainly from a main contracting point of view, how we deliver things now. I've been that way for 20 years, and the point where I thought Sue and David might correct me is from a design point of view. Obviously, there's been technological advances from that side, but then I don't know if it's mirrored with what's happening on site as such.
Interesting. I mean, do you think, Rob, picking up on this point earlier, actually, that Sue mentioned, do you think that some of the construction and building standards and procurement processes as well, do you think that they sort of hamper then the ability for education providers and their project teams to really kind of fly with the innovative use of design and technology?
I think what we've got in place at the minute's good. It's obviously working. It's as successfully delivering schemes as we are, but there's always potential for improvement. And I think anyone who said that there isn't an avenue there to sort of go down and review, be a bit naive. Obviously, as I keep coming back to what we try and do independently as a company, what our ethos is, and David Harland mentioned it earlier about localism. So when you go to a college in Preston, obviously you can tell I'm not from Preston, maybe by my accent, but we don't bring our contractors from Liverpool. We try and get the Preston locality, the Preston people to work on it. So it's understanding that as well. And when it comes to procurement, front end, I think at the minute, it's right. The frameworks I think that are set up are really good avenues of work, and not just for the main contractor, but for all the consultants involved. I think it's pretty good at the minute, but yeah.
Okay. We've actually had quite a few questions from the audience, so I'm just going to take a pause for a sec to address some of these. We've got Jeremy Hines has asked a question at the top. Following from David's presentation, is there always a risk that focusing on the interior and making the space inside work, that we neglect the external appearance? Don't both count, but in different ways? I mean, that's an interesting question. I wonder if David or any of you, David, you look like you're itching to answer that one.
Well, no, I'm happy to. I'd love to hear Sue's view on that as well. And I'm sure we'll be both aligned. Yeah, of course it's both. And architecture is not about internal space. I'm fully aware of that. I'm not saying that design of space is different from architecture. What I'm trying to say is I think there is a level on top of consideration set that could be considered to make them more powerful in their effect on people. But obviously, both are absolutely essential. I'm trying to champion more the internal being considered more, I think.
Okay, Stu.
Yeah, I mean, definitely both have to be considered equally, but I think there's a third domain, which is public realm as well. A lot of our institutions sit in cities, and I think previously universities were quite inward looking, but actually now they're huge civic players within the community. They have to be outward facing, they have to be permeable. We've got to encourage use for an education building to be used by everybody, not just students or pupils. So, to me, a way of doing that is connecting buildings and cities and communities together by really good quality public realm. And it's quite interesting, a lot of university buildings, the way they're procured, it's a plot of land and there's a business case, and that means we can get 5,000 more new students on campus because we've got this additional space. And you never get business cases for public realm. And I think even if you look at, down the Oxford Road corridor now, about how transformational that is with the new public realm, connecting all the institutions together with the hospitals as a clear innovation district. Public realm does have this opportunity to connect up, and then with active, neutral ground floors that anybody can go into, like a shop, a library, a town hall. Whether it's a commercial facility or a university facility, it doesn't matter. So active ground floors and public realm are really important. But I do get Dave's point, because furniture and interiors often gets lost. And I think a lot of universities just think a bit of corporate branding and a bit of colours and picking the pink and the purple chairs sorts out the interiors, and it doesn't. And I think with some of the well-being and the well standards now, I think interiors are getting a lot more focus around natural materials, bringing in greening, making sure they've got beautiful daylight, the right acoustics. Interiors are being more considered now as well.
That's interesting. And I actually linked to that. You mentioned earlier on, David, in your presentation about refurbishments as well. And then we've got a question here. Do you think the more historic institutions will change in the same way as more modern institutions? So Oxbridge and the red bricks, you might have slightly more issues with listed buildings and so on. So perhaps we'll move back inside now and look at the opportunities for that.
To try and tie all of that together with the previous comment as well. So to Rob's point about technology, BIM as an idea. The idea that the digital information which designs the building, constructs the building, maintains the building, and actually is how the building operates. The idea of a digital twin that then becomes a data set through which participation, efficacy, and so forth could be monitored. That has just never really happened. It's kind of happened a few times, a little bit, and blah, blah, blah. But actually, that is what really needs to happen, because when I'm talking about the arteries of the experience, and you'll see he's talking about how all the ground floor open access areas tie together. To me, a university, I'm sure it's the same to Sue as well. The arteries of a building, of an estate, are the experience. You move through these things and they change your mind. But actually, I'm not talking about just chairs and furniture and finishes and materials. I'm talking about communication. How is the faculty, the university, the alumni, the history, the current affairs, the relevance of what's happening with all the data in the world, how is that brought to you, rather than it just being presumed you're getting that through your own digital handset? If you think about what happens when you go around a mall, these companies don't spend billions and billions of pounds on communication and advertising and marketing because it doesn't work. It works. It affects you. It connects with you. It grabs your attention. It makes you change your mindset, change your behavior. Rather than just seeing that we get, photocopied signs and stick them on walls and say, go in there, and that's that faculty and it's wayfinding and welcome. And any building that has the right welcome on the wall means that it's not actually doing its job being welcoming in the first place. That is a classic sign of a corporate headquarters, because they feel so alienating they have to write welcome on the wall. So there is a difference in mindset about how the way that digital technology, in terms of the design process and its application into site, into the way that the people who live in this place afterwards, and the people who have to maintain it and run it and monitor it. And if you really think of digital twinning created through BIM, you could put machine learning into that can look for patterns and go, 5 years on from what we intended, that room has never been or that thing has never done, that door's never been opened, people don't come in that way. And actually the digital twinning thing could save us so much energy. It could be really brilliant in terms of the climate issue, in terms of the energy issue, and it could create a much more compelling experience for the population that live and work there.
I mean, this question we've got at the very top of our Q&A, how will changing technology allow a greater experience for students? This is all what you've been talking about just now. Isn't there a role for more immersive technology, especially during COVID? So let's explore the digital technology side a bit more. I mean, I'm actually interested in the flip side of it, the negative of that. What are the problems with this accumulation of data from use of immersive tech and digital tech in educational buildings? Are there privacy issues? Have you come across any of this in your work, Sue? Like, what are your views on this?
Well, I think everybody talks about the smart campus nowadays, don't they? And I think, technology has got a huge role to play in terms of the user experience. I get off a train, I know how to get to campus because there's a bus coming in 2 minutes and my app on my phone tells me that. As well as sort of the operational side of an estate, making sure that we can operate the estate in the right way, in terms of functional operational, but sort of energy as well. Now, as I say, I'm not a techno wizard, but from designing buildings, I think what we've got to design for is it takes 3 years, doesn't it, to design, build and open a building. So we've got to just make sure that we have very good, resilient, smart infrastructure. So the current technologies and the future technologies of today can be plugged on. And I think, it's quite interesting when Dave looks at the sort of retail sector where it's big sheds and people come and fit them out quickly, don't they? And a year later, they scrap them and come in again. And it might be that we have less space, but it's used more and utilized more. And therefore, the idea of making sure those spaces are smart to allow people to come and fit it out for a particular use and for a particular cohort of students or a thematic topic, and then move it on and bring someone else in. So I when I talk about smart from an architect's point of view, to me it's about smart infrastructure. It's like the iPhone. It's beautifully designed, it's flexible, it's adaptable, and you can put apps in to make it useful. And we need to design buildings like iPhones so that when these future technologies come in, they plug and play and it's very seamless. I probably haven't answered your question about data, but that's my perspective about sort of smart technologies in campuses now.
Yeah, absolutely. David, do you have a view on the data issue and sort of potential pitfalls of this in the education sector?
Yeah. I mean, I think we were talking before. I mentioned, I don't know if people have seen the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. I think, I recommend you watch it, and I think you'll have it. If you have children, you may have a different view of the world after you've watched that program. Certainly in their use of social media. Clearly Silicon Valley has effectively lost control of the data, and the algorithms are now, maximizing their effects. So they are running the systems, and most of the time, the companies, they don't really know what they're doing. You know what I mean? They are sending us notifications based on algorithms, and they can't possibly track what all the algorithms are affecting the way the information and stuff is being served to us and how it changes our habits. Is basically a précis of the outtake. The truth of it is, with data, it's very different from a school to a university. For a start, students at university are adults, and they can opt in and opt out of CDPR, all this kind of thing. What data you can and cannot use. I'm sure that will become more and more the case. When you start university, I'm sure very soon there will be a which data will you share with us and which will you not. Because at the moment, that we've just had all that with all the privacy settings on our phones from the European government and from the likes of Google, etc. But I also think that people do happily opt in when it's beneficial to them. So, for instance, I cycle, so I have a iPhone, I watch, blah blah blah. I have Strava, and I love I love the information Strava gives me. So I let it have as much information as I possibly can. We live in a world where you're going to be much more in control of it, and I think you would give away your data when it's specific, needed, and useful. And I think that schools and universities, specifically universities, can maximize that and can have a very open and honest conversation with their students about providing safety, for instance, or providing the obvious connection to academic work and cloud-based storage, blah blah blah. But I do think that the use of data within environments, people worry that it's kind of big brother, pernicious monitoring, and there's been a lot of happening in buildings where people have gone black, they gone dark, they turn off all their signals and people can't track them anymore. So it does need to be sorted out, but I think it needs to be sorted out from a way that benefits the person rather than benefits the university. And I think that's the lens. A lot of buildings are constructed to benefit the landlord effectively, save money, turn the lights off, shut the windows, stop spending money on heating, all of those kind of things, which are great for the maintenance costs. Not sure they're really that great all the time for the tenants, apart from keeping things on an even point. But if you're trying to create a much more compelling experience, data can help personalize things. Know it's you. Bring that thing up you were doing. We found this. You might be interested in this. We've gone through our catalogue, our archive of all the books in the university and found that thing that you just tweeted about, it was actually written on a book 10 years ago and it's on that shelf over there. Do you want me to get it delivered to your house? Or your halls. So there's all sorts of positive ways that data can be used as well that I think we need to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Sue. Yes, and then I'll come on to you, Rob.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think universities, what COVID's given people an opportunity is a bit of experimental. So actually there's a time now where you can test things where before you probably couldn't, because you had to have a strategy and you had to have a plan. And it's a bit like our workplaces. What encourages people to come back to the work? Well, let's test some new environments. So there's a huge opportunity now to test technology. And I think schools need to embrace that. How many kids nowadays, the first thing they do, they have to hand over their phone. Their phone is probably one of the most powerful learning devices ever. So technology does come with some issues around data, etc., but it has to be embraced. And now really is the time to experiment with different ways of learning through technology and space, which is quite exciting, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sarah,
yes, Rob.
I can't interact with raising my hand or nothing like David because
I know. I've been aware that you've been sat there patiently.
Could I comment on just a couple of generic things that have already just been discussed, really? Going back to one of Sue's points, sort of question that came earlier about the inside, outside, and outside the outside. As a main contractor, it's something you find quite common when it comes to delivering a project, that the public realm works, the highway improvement works, whatever you might call it, the outside of the outside is always sort of, I'd be careful to say it, but it is sort of forgot of a little bit, and it get put in something called a provisional sum item, which is generally not enough to do justice really to the product that you end up delivering in the immediate building that you deliver. But you can go, and I'm conscious the numbers are dropping and people are maybe looking for lunch at the minute. Also was picking up on, this is an opportunity at the minute, great opportunity again to try out new things. It's also a massive risk. There's projects probably delivered in the last 5 years. There was a school in Knowsley, multi-million pounds, in the teens of £1 million. It's now lying dormant. So it's got to be, where every opportunity's got to be a risk, and the measured approach just needs to be taken as to what that is at the minute. But it's a great time right now to get those discussions. I think the COVID situation's allowing for a lot of pre-construction works to be accelerated, certainly from our point of view, from the development side that we lead. We can be more proactive about things more than we ever have. Probably the last 6 months, we've progressed schemes that would took maybe 18 months. We've delivered that in 6 months because we can have interactive meetings like this. People aren't having to travel necessarily from Manchester to Liverpool 2 weeks Thursday when we can all meet for an hour in someone's office, we can do it via this media. So yeah, I just thought I would pick up on those points really.
Absolutely, yeah. Rob, I wonder if you want to tackle this first question as well. We've got to wrap up in a couple of minutes,
yeah.
So let's see if we can answer both these questions from our audience. So we've got the more affluent institutions will be able to adapt more readily, further stretching the divide between rich and poor. How do we address this disparity? I mean, you talked about some of the community engagement initiatives, actually. Do you want to tackle that one?
Perfect case in question is a scheme we delivered not too long ago for Sefton Council, a college there called Huberg College. In the area it's not the greatest of areas, and I'm okay saying that because I only live a couple of miles away, by the way, so it's not the greatest of areas, but they've aligned themselves with Merseycare and not just delivering a sort of a secondary school facility, it's also aligned itself with a mental health facility. So it's a really soft, cool space, somewhere that of a day when the students are in there and they come to the break, they want to stay in there for their break because it is quite a cool place to be. And then afterwards, so after the hour sort of 5 p.m. onwards, the local community are invited to there for sort of mental health recovery sessions. And again, it's that sort of duality of the building that enabled Huberg to get the funding to deliver such a great sort of, in an area that might be seen as or less affluent is probably the right way of putting it. And I think that encapsulates both of Andy's points really. They create an outdoor space there, which is a nice outdoor space to go and sit in for local residents who probably aren't afforded that space by just having a 2-3 minute walk. So it afforded the sort of the local community that area to go, but the additional funding was drawn down not just from DFE or LEP, but also Merseycare. So a sort of health and education combination.
Brilliant, thanks, Rob. I wonder if either of our two other panelists would like to contribute to this final question about the role of sporting and activity facilities, additional sort of buildings that can help to address some of these macro trends that are becoming more and more important now in the wake of COVID.
So, yeah, I mean, I have to say the external spaces which were forgotten in budgets are becoming more important in this post-COVID world. We can all walk outside, can't we? But we can't mix inside at the moment. So actually having spaces that connect buildings is important, create settings, but spaces where people can go externally. And I think Europe's got some really good example of those sorts of external spaces that we need to provide. Just the idea of being able to get away, go for a nice walk, some green space in cities. I think we're seeing so many more projects like that at the moment. One of my biggest gripes, and I do think education is the catalyst for regeneration of some of these more socially deprived communities, is that schools and universities, their utilisation rates are really low. They're closed probably more of the time than they're open. And in the pandemic, everything shut down. So the affluent could get on their laptops and have the space to do online learning. But those people in flats with no technology couldn't, and libraries shut down so quickly. So we've got to see better integration of community facilities and education. I mean, we're doing lots of schools in Scotland at the moment, and they're not just schools, they're post offices, they're police stations. They're put integrated community facilities in one building. And what's great is if, in the case of a pandemic, actually, if schools need more space, they can flow into the community spaces and use them. And likewise, when pupils aren't there, communities can start to use these spaces. So our siloed approach to delivering education buildings has to be challenged, and we should be seeing fully integrated community buildings with external spaces, internal spaces that can be used by everybody all through the year, every day.
Yeah. So I think that's a really, really interesting point, and I think it's a good point to stop as well, because I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. We could carry on for hours, but I think we've covered off some really interesting points. So thank you so much to our speakers for your comments and views, and to our audience for your engagement and questions. So I hope this event has been useful and interesting for everyone watching, and that we've pinned down some useful learnings to help guide the industry over the coming months. Thanks again to our sponsors, Savills and ROC Consulting. If you enjoyed the networking and you want to give it another go, we do have a further half hour, so you can stay around and chat to guests, share thoughts on today's subject and arrange follow-ups in the other room. Our next Place Northwest event will be Place Resi on 5th of November, and you can register for this via our website. Thanks so much for coming today, and we hope to see you all very soon.